Yêu thì chỉ gọi là tân toán.
Welcome. Okay, I think my audio is working. Somebody give a thumbs up if you can hear okay. Just make sure everything's working okay. Got it. All right, okay. Okay, we're going to be talking about agile aligned organizations. This is something that I see happen a lot of places where we've got maybe teams doing really well individually with trying to follow agile, but the organization may not actually be able to take advantage of that. So we're going to look at what that means today. So agile aligned organizations. So first question I want to ask is, what does it mean for an organization to be agile? So I'll bring up Slido, and there should be a pop-up in WebEx with Slido. Here's a link, I think, that will get you to it, or you can go to Slido and type that number in. So what was Agile designed for? Was it designed for organizations? Was it designed for individuals, departments, or teams? So I say what was Agile designed for. I'm not talking about SAFe or any scaling framework, but the actual Agile Manifesto. Who is it addressing? And I keep the Slido thing open because we're gonna have lots of things as we go through this. I've got I think an abnormally large number of questions in this particular talk. So it looks like most of us are saying, about 75% of us are saying teams. We've got about 25% saying organizations, and then a few with individual. No one's kind of on the department level. So be thinking of that. We're going to look at some things in the Agile Manifesto and try to answer that question as we go. So it looks like most of us are saying that we think it was written mainly for, it's mainly targeting teams. So maybe what we need to ask is, what does it mean for, start by asking, what does it mean for a team to be agile? So what does it mean for a team to be agile? So choose any two of these. Is it that they follow the agile principles? Is it that they use SAFe? Is it that they follow Scrum? Is it that they have a daily stand-up? Or that they value the agile values? So what two of these things would you say determine whether a team or are the definition of a team that's being agile? We've got follow the agile principles is 85%, closely followed, and agile values, those are both got it. We've got about 10% of the votes that have come in have been for having a daily stand-up. I'm not trying to say any of these things are necessarily bad, but if we look at what agile actually is, the Agile Manifesto is where we define what agile is in the terms of agile. Now you may find that having a daily stand-up helps you achieve agility, but the daily stand-up should be something that's supporting the agile values and agile principles. So it's a secondary thing. Lots of teams find it's very, very useful, but for some reason it wasn't actually helping you support the agile values or principles. You need to have some other reason that you're trying to do it. So if we're looking at this, what it means for a team level, then the next question might come up is, can an organization follow the agile principles? And at first it sounds like yes, but let's look at a few principles here and say, okay, so the Agile principle that says business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project, where does this happen? Does this happen at the team level, at the department level, or the organizational level? And it's kind of interesting to see we've got a wide variety of opinions here. I've got my opinion, which is going to drive things. That doesn't mean that any other way of looking at this is necessarily wrong. But it looks like most of us are saying the actual developers and business people working together is going to happen more at the team level. That's where that type of work is going to happen rather than being at the organizational level. So another question. At regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. Where does this happen? Does this happen at the team level, the department level, or the organizational level? So this one actually kind of is pretty explicit that's saying the team reflects. Now, we could make a case for saying that if every team in the organization is doing this, then it's happening at the organizational level, but the actual work of following this is going to be occurring probably at the team level because we specifically say the teams are what's doing the reflecting. And one more question. Working software is the primary measure of progress. Where does this happen? So are we typically producing working software at the team level, the department level, or the organizational level? And this may be different in different places. I know some places teams are not capable of delivering a fully working piece of something. I would suggest that the Agile principles kind of push that to try to make teams to where they can actually deliver working software. But there are some places where that doesn't happen. Yes, hopefully everything is working together. But in many cases, the places that we're really trying to get the ability to deliver a working unit of software is going to be at the team level, and then that rolls up into something that the entire organization is delivering, or maybe the department is delivering. So, like I said, on this, particularly this one, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. But what I do want to point out is that if the Agile Manifesto is mostly aimed at team behavior, then what does it mean for an organization to be agile? And most things we look at there, and I think if you look at the principles in the Agile Manifesto, a lot of them are really geared toward teams. And I think when it was written, that's really what they're focusing on, is how can we make teams effective? So if that's the case, and this talk is based on the idea that it is kind of more oriented toward teams. The manifesto is more oriented toward teams. Then what does it mean for an organization to be agile? It doesn't mean an organization can't be agile, but maybe that looks a little bit different. In other words, maybe all the things we're doing at a team level to get organizational agility, we need to do some things a little bit differently than just saying the organization is going to follow the Agile Manifesto. Or put another way, it's possible that we could have every team following the Agile Manifesto and doing very, very well at that, but still have an organization that is not designed in a way that makes the organization actually have agility. So what does it mean for an organization to be agile? Well, here's a few ideas, okay? Some of these may resonate more or less. So one could be that the organization follows the Agile values and principles. So that would be a possible thing. Like the organization is looking and saying, are we actually doing all these things? Are we delivering working software? Are we doing reflecting and improving? That could be one way that the organization could be agile. Maybe it could also mean that all the teams follow the Agile principles and values. So in that case, we're basically saying that organizational agility is the sum of its parts. If all the individual teams are following the Agile values and principles, then the organization as a whole will have agility. I would suggest this probably isn't, I think there's value in considering this, but I think for things to work at the organizational level, to make the sum of the parts actually have agility may require some things that go beyond what you'll find in the Agile Manifesto. We'll look at those in a little bit. So another thing could be that for an organization to be agile, it means the organization needs to actually demonstrate agility. Now, this definition doesn't say how we actually get there, but just the idea of being able to adapt, take information, get rapid feedback, that's what it means for an organization to be agile. And then here's the definition. This is the one that I like because it's ambiguous enough. You can, I think, really makes you think about everything we've talked about so far. But the organization is aligned to leverage Agile at the team level. And the reason I like this way of thinking about it isn't that the others are necessarily wrong, but I think this really makes us think about how everything works together. And if we have a bunch of teams that are all individually delivering with agility, but we don't have a way that the organization as a whole is really making that all produce something at the organizational level, I don't think we really achieve everything we could as an organization. So in thinking of that, what would be an example of an organization that is not aligned to leverage team level agility? So which one of these things would be an organization that is not aligned to actually take advantage of the things that the teams are doing? So one, organization enforces top-down team structure. Two, organization allows teams the flexibility to restructure in ways that help the team deliver. So which one of these would not leverage team level agility? And number three, the organization encourages face-to-face communication between teams. And it's maybe a little bit harder to do, but if an organization is wanting to leverage team level agility, which of these things should they steer away from? It's another way to look at it. And so it looks like most of us are saying that and if an organization is enforcing a top-down team structure, that may actually kind of conflict with letting teams have the agility and flexibility they need to deliver well. If an organization allows teams flexibility to restructure in ways that helps teams deliver, that probably is going to leverage team level agility, because if the team level agility is constantly reflecting and saying, how can we make things better? They may come up with things with saying something like, oh, you know what, right now we've got this DevOps department that we're having to coordinate with, but that's just created a silo for us. Maybe we need to bring somebody from that department in and actually embed them in our team. So an organization that allows the team's flexibility to restructure in ways that help the teams deliver would be very open to that idea. An organization that enforces just top-down team structure, just here's how everything's going to work, will probably not leverage the full agility that the team is capable of delivering. Okay, so how can organizations align to leverage agile teams? And that's what we're going to be looking at here. Now, I want to point out that many organizations are designed specifically to prevent agility. In a lot of organizations, over the years, what they've done is built up a culture and procedures and processes that are specifically designed to make it harder for teams to do different things, because they're trying to make them all look the same. And while there may be some good intentions behind some of that, and maybe some of the things are actually really, really good, if that becomes the dominant culture, it means teams aren't going to be able to take advantage of the feedback they're producing and actually change and adapt and deliver better for the organization. So how can organizations align to leverage agile teams? And we're going to look at five different things. These aren't necessarily exhaustive, but 5 things that I see that can really help organizations align to leverage agile teams. So you've got teams that are following the Agile Manifesto and following the principles and valuing the values. Here's some 5 things that will help the organization leverage that in order to get organizational level agility. So 1, metrics that drive agility. If we are using metrics that actually drive things that push us toward the agile principles, we will achieve more organizational agility than if we have metrics that may push us away from the agile principles. So here's a kind of related story that I think is a helpful thing to think about. There was a help desk one time that was very proactive in the way that they worked. They would go out and try to make sure that no one had any problems with their computers before people even experienced the problem. So they had logging turned on to where they could keep track. If a hard drive was failing, they would find out and replace it before the person even reported a problem. So a lot of the work they were doing was happening well before anyone actually filed a ticket with them. Well, this worked really well. People were happy and stuff until new management came in, and new management decided that they needed to manage the help desk a lot better. So what they decided to do was try to have some metrics that would show how well the help desk was doing. And they were going to tie incentive bonuses to those metrics. So the metric they decided they wanted to use was how many tickets each person closed in the help desk. Well, the help desk people discovered very quickly that they weren't going to be getting their bonuses because they had very few tickets that would come in. And if they wanted to get their bonuses, they needed to close more tickets. So finally, they came up with a a way to do that. They still wanted to be proactive in what they were doing because that's what actually made their customers happy, made the people happy. So what they started doing is every Monday morning about 9:30, they would unplug the internet for about 5-10 minutes. And everybody would file out a help desk thing saying they couldn't get to the internet. Then they would plug it back in and go through and close every single help desk ticket saying that the internet they had solved the problem. The rest of the week, outside of those 10 minutes, they continued to do exactly what they had done before. And the point I want to make here is this particular metric drove behavior that was the exact opposite of what was good for the organization. It's very easy to have metrics that seem like a really, really good thing, but actually drive you in the exact opposite, drive your organization the exact opposite of what you want if you're wanting to actually achieve organizational agility. So, question for you about your organization, and this is not going to be reported to anyone, so you can put whatever you think is the right answer for you. I just want to see what's normal out there. What metric does your organization pay the most attention to? Is it the cycle time, the velocity, the percentage of things done? Let's see, they jumped around. Where was the velocities? The sprint goal success rate. So, when teams make a sprint goal, what percentage of the time they actually achieve that sprint goal? I think I covered them all there. And it looks like a lot of us are using velocity, and that's a very common measurement for a lot of teams. For a lot of places, the percentage done is very, very important, and that's also very, very common. Comes from a strong like PMI, project management background. Places that have that will often really focus on that. Sprint goal success rate. That sounds like a metric that would make a lot of sense to try to follow, right? Because it's like we're setting goals and are we meeting our goals? Down here toward the bottom, though, fewer of us are actually in places where cycle time or work in progress are actually metrics that are being paid the most attention to. I would actually suggest here that velocity may be one of the worst metrics to really focus on. And the reason is because if we're thinking of velocity, we're saying how many story points can I actually, how many story points have we accomplished within a unit of time, like within each sprint, or sometimes they measure just in weeks. The problem with that particular measurement is if I'm being measured based on velocity, I'm going to be measured, and velocity is probably a bad term for it anyway, but I'm going to be measured on how much stuff I can get done within the 2 weeks. This is going to make it very easy for me to try to batch more stuff together because my focus is often going to be on trying not to incur the overhead, like the delivery overhead and all those things that go into delivering just a small story all the way through. I'm probably going to be more likely to want to try to batch things together so I can get more things through. The problem with that is it really sets you up to lose agility rather than gain agility. Because if I'm trying to batch more things together, I'm deferring how long it is before I'm actually going to get feedback from the customer on those things. I'm also going to be less willing to invest in the things that will let me deliver small things all the way through really rapidly because the measurement that's being used is focused on delivering things at the end of the sprint and all these things together. So I may not invest in the things that I would want if I was focusing on delivering something, the smallest thing that shows value and getting that all the way through to the customer. You should also measure the direction, yes. So yeah, I haven't seen any teams reporting negative velocity, but I'm sure that has happened in some cases. So velocity may actually be pushed, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't measure it. That may be very important in your organization. You may not be able to change that, but an organization that's really, really focused on velocity may be creating side effects that aren't actually aren't taking advantage of the agility that's present on the team. A sprint goal success rate is another interesting one. Did I have a thing? I thought I had a question about this, but I guess, where'd that go? Did I put it somewhere else? Okay, I think I created a question and either didn't get it in here or put it somewhere else. But sprint goal success rate is another one that may not be the best thing to be looking at because if I'm so concerned, if everyone is very, very concerned about whether or not they're going to make the sprint goal, it's going to be a lot easier to try to take on less in order to make sure that I'm successful, that we're successful. if you never meet your sprint, if you never fail to meet your sprint goal, it probably isn't an indication that your team is just really, really good and efficient. It probably is an indication that they're not doing anything that actually stretches them. They're, if this is what they're actually capable of, they're only setting the goal to here because they want to make sure they don't accidentally, guess too far. So those are things to watch out for. The ones that I think are probably most useful here are actually going to be cycle time and probably secondary to that, work in progress. Because if I'm driven by cycle time and I'm actually doing that based on things that are valuable to the customer, I'm now going to be very willing to make the investments in things that will make it faster to go from we were asked for this and then we deliver this. The cycle time is harder to it's a lot harder to make the cycle time go down if you're dealing with increments of work that are actually valuable to your customer. It's a lot harder to drive that down, which is what you want to happen with cycle time, without doing all the right things. It's a lot easier to get velocity numbers that are high while doing things that are not necessarily in the best interest of agility. Okay, so metrics that drive agility, velocity, cycle time, and deployment frequency. So velocity is the one here that I probably wouldn't consider to be the best thing that drives agility. Cycle time, and with that, deployment frequency. How often are we getting useful things into the customer hands are metrics that are probably going to be more useful. Yes, JC pointed out that to measure velocity also has the adverse effect of having members always estimating higher. So if velocity is what I'm getting measured on, I'm going to be like, is this 3 points or 5 points? I'm probably going to want to choose 5 points in order to give me a little bit more padding and also to make the velocity numbers go up. With cycle time, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter how big you said it was. You said, how can we make this thing as small as possible and get it through to the customer? And how long did that take? That's a lot harder to, even with the best intention, it's a lot harder to take that and somehow mess the numbers up to make them look right, unless you're just outright lying about them. With velocity, it's a lot easier. You have pressure as an individual to push toward getting better metrics for things that actually are counterproductive. Okay, number 2, how can organizations align to leverage agile teams? Create a culture that correctly measures risk. So correctly measuring risk. So how does your organization view risk? So do you avoid risk as much as possible? Are you willing to take on risk that has potentially catastrophic consequences? So way too willing to take on risk that has potentially catastrophic consequences? Or are you good at attempting things with low risk but high reward while avoiding the reverse? So it looks like most of us are at places where we're attempting things with low risk but high reward while avoiding the reverse. And that's great. A lot of the places I've worked with are very much avoiding risk to the point that sometimes it's hard to have a conversation about what the risk is actually present in that. Um, I was working with a large bank that was dealing with something. They were working on some new software, and they were very worried about what would happen if this very unlikely event were to occur. And they were spending hours and hours dealing with this, what they do, how they'd have to rewrite the software if this very unlikely event were to occur. And so we started having some discussions about, what is the actual risk of this thing that we're talking about, and how much are we spending right now talking about it? If it's really, really unlikely, um, how much are we investing in it right now that maybe could be spent on just going ahead and getting the software out the door? So this is cool. Actually, I'm surprised that so many people are actually in that top category there. I think particularly if you work in an area like banking or sometimes government stuff, you end up in the second category. It's a lot easier to end up in the second category where we're very, very much try to avoid all risk as much as possible, because if anything goes wrong, because if you're in a place where it can actually has catastrophic consequences, sometimes those organizations are not very good at identifying the difference between something that can have a catastrophic consequence and something that the consequences are fairly low. So creating culture that correctly measures risk. Are we spending more time trying to prevent a risk than it would cost to fix it? And so here's an example. If we think of tires, so how much are you as an individual willing to spend to prevent a flat tire? So probably not a whole, I mean, there are tires that do not get flat. flats, right? And you could buy tires for your car that are impossible to go, that can't go flat. You can drive on them no matter what happens to them. Most of us do not put those on our car because the chances of it getting flat are low enough, and the cost, if it happens, of fixing it is low enough that it's not worth trying to put military tires on our vehicle. Now, on the other hand, for the military, if you get a flat and it means you could get killed, the risk looks completely different. But for most of us, getting a flat just means we pull over. We may lose an hour or so of our day trying to get it all worked out. Maybe you pull over and you call Uber, and then you call someone to come and take care of the car for you or something. Or you just get out, you put on your spare, and you drive it somewhere. It takes you an hour to get to where, there's all those types of things, but it's not a catastrophic failure. In some situations, it would be a catastrophic failure. But I think this is a useful way to think about the way that we're approaching software, because if we're willing to put on military grade tires on our software for something that the cost, if something does go wrong, is fairly rare and it's very inexpensive to fit, we can way overinvest in something that's not necessary. And so this type of thinking of how we're managing risk at an organizational level is a very important part of being able to take advantage of the agility that's provided by teams. Because if we don't have this ability to really think through the risk, it's going to be hard for teams to actually deliver things rapidly, because they're going to be so caught up on dealing with potential risks that their ability to deliver is going to be impeded. Okay, number 3. So how can organizations align to leverage agile teams? Number 3, reward attempts at doing the right thing. So in your organization, which is more likely to result in a promotion? Doing things the same way as they've always been done, even when that's not very effective, or trying something different that has a good chance of better results but failing? And this can be a very big deal, because some cultures are very tied to, if you do things the way everyone else is doing it, you are massively rewarded. Even if you're like, that's what gets promoted, even if what you're doing is creating lots of failure. Even what I'm sorry, not creating lots of failure, but even what you're doing is very ineffective. The fact that you're just doing it the way everyone else is doing it is what gets rewarded. Now, it looks like 62% of us are in a place where trying something different that has a good chance of better results but failing is actually more likely to result in a promotion. So that's great. If you're in a place like that, that is a very healthy environment to be in. And if you notice, this idea ties back into the thing of risk, right? If I'm taking a risk on something that we have good reason to expect will produce better results, but then we get into it and then we discover it doesn't, and it's just an experiment that we tried and we find out that doesn't work, and then we try something else, but it was low risk, that's a good thing. You want to reward and encourage that type of behavior on your agile teams. If you're punishing or making it harder to have that type of behavior, you're going to push your teams away from agility. Even if they're being agile within the way that they're working on a daily basis, they're not going to be able to bring agility to the way that maybe they interact with other teams, or the things that are a little bit more that would show up more and have a bigger impact, but also maybe more noticeable if something actually fails. Okay, so rewarding attempts at doing the right thing. If no one is failing, then no one is trying anything new. So in this case, I think it's useful to think about, if your team, if there aren't any failures, it probably isn't a good sign. If no one's actually trying something that you can say, oh, you know what, we tried this, it turns out that doesn't work very well. We tried this way of deploying the software because we thought it would be lower risk, more repeatable and stuff. Turns out there's some type of an interaction we didn't know about, so it set us back a week. But now we know not to do that. We're going to try something else. If those types of things are not happening, then it probably isn't because your team is just really good, or your teams aren't. It's probably not because your teams are just so good that they never try anything that they always make all the correct decisions. It probably means that they're not willing to try anything that could actually benefit what they're doing. So what if you only aim for what you can achieve? Like, let's say you've got a pole vaulter, and the pole vaulter knows that they can pole vault over, don't know a whole bunch about pole vaulting. They know they can pole vault over 10 feet. That works. They consistently do that. I don't know if that's high or low for pole vaulting. If somebody pole vaults, you can let me know, so I can do this right next time I give this talk. and they know they can do 10 feet, but they never are willing to go up and try 10 feet and 3 inches because they know they can do that, and failing is worse than actually getting better. That type of person is not going to be the person that breaks records, right? Because they're never willing to try something that will push them. They're never going to try something, fail, learn from it, and then try again and maybe do a little bit better and continue to grow. Your organization needs to be encouraging your pole vaulting teams to actually raise the bar and celebrate if they tried something and they were close but they missed it, but it was actually, that's improvement, and you want that to happen. Okay, here's the question I was looking for. How often should teams achieve their sprint goal? So we mentioned that previously that sometimes we're looking at the metrics of how often teams achieve their sprint goal. What would be a good number here? Would it be 100% of the time? Would it be 90% of the time, 70% of the time, 60% of the time, 50% of the time, or never? What would actually be a good number here for how often they achieve their sprint goal? And it looks like most of us are at the 90%. So if we miss our sprint goal one time out of 10, that's what we're saying there. I think it's interesting. We've got 6% are saying that no, we should be hitting the sprint goal 100% of the time. I would suggest that if you are hitting it 100% of the time, it probably means that it probably means your teams could actually deliver a lot more each sprint, but they're setting their goals so low that they never, ever miss it. If you think of somebody that's playing basketball and they only they make 100% of their shots, or a really, really high percentage of their shot, that's good on one hand, but it also means that they may not be willing to take a shot that's 5 feet back from where they know that they can make it. And if the value of the shot is high enough, that might be a bad thing, even if it makes their stats go down some. And I would actually, so it looks about half of us are saying 90% of the time. I would actually suggest that 90% of the time may be a little bit too high. Just because if I think of a team that every 10 times they try something, every 10 times they say, here's what we're going to do, and we're going to deliver on that, and only 10% of the time are they off. I would still say that probably means that those 9 times, it's not because they were stretching themselves in those 9 times where they got it. It probably means that they intentionally set the bar low enough that they knew they could make it, or that there wasn't any chance that they could miss it. They were setting goals that only had a 10% chance of failure. The teams may be more efficient overall and get more done if they're setting goals that they actually think there's maybe a 30% chance that they could fail. Like we think we can do this, but we're not. There's a higher than 10% chance that we're not going to be able to deliver this because there's unknowns. Because if you're at a point that you say there's only 10, or that you think it's 100% that you can do it, and there's only 10% of the time you're wrong, it probably means that you are making sure there are no unknowns, or there's so much padding in there that you're going to hit it. And if there's that much padding, you may not be stretching yourself as much as you can. Now, it may be different for different teams. The main thing I want to have here, us think about here, isn't that you need to hit a particular percentage, but just that 100% of the time, probably, unless you've got a very special circumstances, if you're hitting it 100% of the time, that probably means the team has less agility than maybe a team that's hitting it maybe 70% of the time, but they're actually getting more done because they're actually attempting greater things. Okay, so number 4, how can organizations align to leverage agile teams? Number 4, organizational wide awareness of the cost of delay. So when we're talking about cost of delay, what we're talking about is the decision we're making when we decide to work on this story or this feature, and we're intentionally deciding to wait on this other story or this other feature, and having the awareness of this other thing we're waiting on is going to cost us this much to wait on that and do this other thing first instead. Because that means that we've had a discussion and awareness of this other thing actually would be more costly to wait on. A lot of times those types of discussions don't happen, but this is a way that organizations can align to leverage the agility from teams if they're actually having those types of discussions and that awareness at an organizational level across the whole organization instead of just on the team level. So in your organization, who regularly talks about the cost of delay for stories on the backlog? And I think I opened this up so you can select more than one. Is it everyone regularly talks about it? Is it no one ever talks about the cost of delay and the stories that are on the backlog? Is it the business, Scrum Masters, or the developers? So it looks like a lot of us are in places where the project managers are the ones that are discussing that the most, followed by the business. And that probably makes sense. Those are the people that oftentimes are going to be that are often going to be in the situation where they're recognizing here's the value this brings. So if we wait on it, here's what it costs us. But then 23% of us are in a place where no one's actually talking about the cost of delay. And the reason this can be so important is because if we have a bunch of teams that are doing really well following the Agile principles, they're very much delivering on looking at the Agile Manifesto and they're guiding their work according to that. If we're not having discussions about the cost of delay, then we probably are not doing a very good job of having good discussions on the prioritization, because cost of delay is what's going to be determining what we work on next. And if we're not good at determining what we work on next, then even if we've got all these teams that are really, really efficient and doing really, really well, but the organization as a whole isn't very good at deciding what the next most important thing is to work on, we're not going to be aligned with taking advantage of the agility that's actually provided by our teams. So the ideal situation is that everyone is very, very aware of, across the organization, very, very aware of the cost of delay associated with what we're choosing to do today, or the cost of delay with what we're choosing to defer today in order to work on something else. So how can organizational teams align to leverage Agile teams? Organizational-wide awareness of the cost of delay. And this feeds into the way that we prioritize things. And I've got a talk on cost of delay. I don't think I'm doing it next week, but in a few weeks, we're going to go back through that. So if this sounds interesting to you, feel free to drop me an email. Let me know that it's interesting. We'll try to bring that to the front of the list. Okay, number 5 here. Okay, good. How can organizations align to leverage Agile teams? Embrace productive chaos. So let's ask you, what situation is easier for your organization to accept? A somewhat chaotic process that's producing better results, or a well-planned process that's producing worse results? Or we don't really have a good way to measure results anyway, so it doesn't matter. In a lot of places I've seen, a well-planned and kind of the culturally acceptable process that produces worse results is the thing that is easier for the organization to accept. Another way of kind of looking at this, if you've ever heard the thing like no one ever got fired for buying from IBM, in a lot of places, if you're buying from IBM, that is very much accepted, even if you're getting a product that is way more expensive and maybe even not the best fit for what you need, but the fact you bought it from IBM is actually more accepted. And I'm not knocking on IBM here. I'm just saying there are situations where it's very much easier to accept that just because that's the norm. If you're in a organization where a planned out process that this is the way we've always done it, well planned probably isn't the best way of putting that. I guess what I'm saying is the culturally accepted, just the way we've always done it, that's producing worse results is easier for an organization to accept than a team that's trying new things and it looks like a little bit of chaos, but is actually getting better results. It's going to be hard for an organization that's not willing to embrace a little bit of chaos when they're able to prove it works well. It's going to be hard for them to leverage the agility that's coming from the teams. So it looks like we're about split between these. We've got some, about 14% here that are saying we don't really have a good way to measure results. And I think that actually is key. Oftentimes, if we're in a situation where we're not willing to embrace things, where there's things that are making us feel uncomfortable, that makes the organization feel uncomfortable, a lot of times that's because we don't have a good way to measure results. Or sometimes we've got a way to measure results, but no one's used to looking at that. No one's used to that actually being important to them. So example of this to kind of think of this is 2 ways to pack marbles. I was at the education stuff my kids do had a big end of year gathering, and I was talking to one of the math teachers, and she was talking with me and some of the kids about some geometry problems of if you take a sphere that's made out of chocolate and fits within a box. This box, if you were to split that sphere up into let's see, what would be 8 spheres that are what would be half of the diameter of the original sphere, and put those in the box with their poles aligned. Will it be the same size box for the same amount of chocolate? Anyway, we were talking about some of this stuff, and there's a whole area of mathematics on basically packing theory, and there's places you can go and actually get, I believe, you can get degrees in how to pack things in boxes, which is fascinating. But there's 2 ways to pack marbles. One would be to lay the marbles out perfectly, to where, almost on a grid. And then on top of that, put another grid where all the poles are in line, and then another layer of that, all the way up. If you do that, when I calculated this out, I believe that's about 45% efficient. So 45% of the space was filled with marbles, and the rest was empty, if I remember right. I should have redone these calculations before I say this, but somewhere in that range, about 45% efficient. On the other hand, if you just take all the marbles and pour them randomly into the box and let them kind of, just go wherever they want to go, it's chaos in one sense, right? They're just falling wherever they randomly fall. But in that particular case, I believe it's about 65% efficient, meaning you're going to fit a lot more marbles in the box because there's less free space. And if we think about it, it kind of makes sense how that would work. But this idea of kind of the chaos being more efficient, if we don't have a way, if your organization isn't willing to accept a little bit of chaos when they can prove it works, it's actually producing something better, it's going to be hard for teams to self-organize and try different things and try some things that fail. It's going to be very hard to kind of embrace that chaotic process that will actually lead to better results over time. So embracing productive chaos. Big question is, can your organization actually identify productive teams? And if you can't, then it's going to be very hard to embrace productive chaos, because you're not going to have any way of actually telling if the team is being productive, because you'll notice the chaos, but you won't notice that if it's actually producing something better. So let's say you have a team that isn't following the standard way of tracking time, or they're not using the standard CI/CD pipeline, but they're 50% more productive than your other teams. Would your organization be more likely to notice their non-compliance? Or would they be more likely to notice how productive they're being and start looking for ways that might be able to be replicated in other teams? So that's an important piece of it. So there's 5 ways to get an organization aligned with Agile in a way that takes advantage and leverages the agility that's happening on individual teams. So now let's give away a t-shirt, okay? So join the quiz. This is a fun way just to help us remember things. This is in no way a reflection of your personal self-worth. It may be more of a reflection of who has the lowest internet latency or who is fastest at clicking. So encourage you to join. It's just a fun way to we're just going to cover some of the things we talked about, give you a chance to interact with it more, because that's how we remember things, right? Is to interact with them multiple times. So go ahead and join. We'll give it a few more seconds, and then we'll go through these. I think I've got 5 questions here, and goal is to give you away one of these shirts. I've got I think I've got small to large still. Can't remember if I've got extra large or if those are ones I haven't printed yet. And if one of these don't fit you, I've got some other shirts that I've got all the sizes still. So we will get you a shirt one way or another. Just if you win, send me your size and your address, and we will get one in the mail to you. Okay, we're going to give it 5 more seconds to join. And I do encourage you to join. This is a lot more fun if everybody participates. I will, if for some reason you weren't able to get to it, here's the link. On the other hand, if for some reason it's being blocked, if you go to slido.com and type in that number, you can join that way. So, okay, so 5 seconds left. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 43, we'll get one more person. Okay. 44, okay, we're ready to go then. Okay, which metric did Mark say is best aligned with agility? Is it velocity? Is it the sprint goal achievement rate? Is it cycle time? Or is it the scrum length? So which metric did I say is most aligned with delivering with agility? And the survey says, okay, we had 50% on cycle time. And yes, cycle time was the thing that was most aligned, best aligned with agility. These other things can be useful, but if we're really, really focused on sprint goal achievement rate of trying to get that at 100%, it may push us to not shoot quite as high. Remember, we were talking about the pole jumper that never wants to miss. They're so worried about missing that they never actually try to move the move the bar up. Okay, so we've got Christopher L in top space, followed by Chris, Jaron, Nick, and Astrid. Next question. As mentioned in this talk, what behaviors is the Agile Manifesto focused on? What behaviors are the Agile Manifesto focused on? The CEO's behavior, the entire organization's behavior, the team level behavior, individual behavior, or behavior at the cell level. And yes, 63%, the team level behavior is what the Agile Manifesto is most focused on. There are some ways to do it at the organization layer, but it's really how the team works. The people that are writing the Agile Manifesto were very much focused on here's how we found for teams to deliver software effectively. Okay, Christopher L, Astrid, Jeff O, AG, I think is how you say it, and Brian. Next question. Mark said we should embrace what? Chaos, productive chaos, safe, or pole vaulters? Should we embrace pole vaulters, safe, productive chaos, or chaos? What's the thing we should embrace? If you try to embrace a pole vaulter while they are pole vaulting, it might be kind of dangerous. They may not take that very well. So yes, not just chaos, but productive chaos. And I think this is great that 2% of us think we should embrace pole vaulters. If you happen to know a pole vaulter that wants to be embraced, that's great, but that's not what we were talking about trying to do here. So productive chaos, yes. So chaos that's actually producing results. And our main thing we want to think about here is that we need a way to measure productivity. But if the process looks a little bit messy, but is producing good results, we need to make sure that our organization doesn't push teams away from delivering that way if it's actually doing what we want. But that implies that we have to have some way to actually know if teams are being productive or not. Okay, next question. According to this talk, in an agile aligned organization, everyone should be thinking about what? Velocity, cost of delay, safe, pole vaulters, or story points? In an agile aligned organization, everyone should be thinking about what? So yes, cost of delay. Velocity was one of those metrics that you may be required to for various reasons, but if you're driven by velocity, it is probably going to likely have some unintended side effects. Whereas with cost of delay, those numbers are a lot harder to gain and are much more aligned with the things you want to see happen on agile teams. So if we've got an organization that's everyone's thinking about cost of delay, you are going to be in a much better place to support the agility that your teams are trying to deliver. 3% of us say that everyone should be thinking about pole vaulters. I haven't ever seen that as a great way to deliver with agility, but if that works for your team and everybody thinking about pole vaulters is a way to get productivity, maybe that's part of the chaos. I don't know, but that's not something I've seen yet. You can let me know how that works. You could start a whole framework based on this if that's what you're experiencing that works well. Okay, Christopher L is in the top spot, followed by Jeff O, AG, Brian, and Astrid. I think this is the last question. In this talk, we used examples of a tire to illustrate what? Increased velocity, preparing to return to the office, account for fluctuations in the rubber market, or correctly manage risk. What was the tire example used to illustrate? And yes, it was the correctly manage risk. Remember, we were talking about how most of us are not willing to invest so heavily in tires that would guarantee that we'd never get a flat that would impede us from driving. We could put on no flat tires on our car. Most of us aren't willing to make that investment because we know the risk is really low. And if the risk is realized, the consequences are pretty low. Fixing it isn't that big a deal. Whereas if we were in a military vehicle getting shot at or something and the consequences of a flat tire might mean death, we would probably be willing to invest quite a bit more in it. So yes, we use the tire as an example how to correctly manage risk. I should have put a pole vaulter one in here too. So, okay, and Jeffo pulled into the top spot, very, very close. Probably it looks like even just less than a second difference here between the top 3 spots. But Jeff, send me a email. Just reply to something. Send me an email with you. You can take a screenshot of this if you want, or I can recognize it. And give me your address and your shirt size, and we will get a shirt headed your way. So, this is showing the hardest question now. What metric did Mark say is best aligned with agility? And that one was actually cycle time. If that seems new to you, be watching for the cycle time talk, or I'm sorry, we're doing cost of delay talk. Cycle time we'll be talking about sometime, but let me know if that sounds of interest, and we can do another talk on how cycle time and some of those metrics work. Okay, and I'm going to switch to one more thing here. This is screen for talk feedback. Please go ahead and fill this out. There's just 2 things you can do that are just number of stars. At least fill that out, and if you have any feedback on how I can make it better or things that were really, really useful that I make sure I keep next time I do this, please throw that in there. I haven't done these for a while, but I usually try to review these before I do a talk again, just to make sure I can do my continual improvement. It's my mini retrospective. Okay, so that wraps up what I wanted to cover for today. I'm going to stick around for a while. If anybody has any questions, concerns, aggravations, dog training tips, any of that, I'd love to hear it. I'm going to stop the streaming here. But yes, I'll open the floor for anybody that has anything they want to chat about. And thank you all for coming. Thank you so much.